The following is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys?
Cowboys! This is the Cowboys Nation podcast with instant reactions and analysis to breaking news and events in Cowboys Nation.
All right, Cowboys Nation, welcome into Podcast Nation here on a lovely Monday morning. Well, afternoon now, it's 1 o'clock. Brian Schottenheimer has officially been named the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. It is a new era here at the Star for the Dallas Cowboys. We've got Ambar Garcia, we've got Kyle Yeomans, we've got Derek Eagleton here, and myself, Nicole Hutchison, your host on our Podcast Nation show to get some instant reactions of the new hire. Guys, a lot to unpack, obviously. Jerry Jones speaking very highly of Brian Schottenheimer as the new head coach, Stephen Jones as well, and even Brian Schottenheimer having a little bit of emotion, Jerry as well. Let's just get your overall thoughts of this press conference because I want to get to some topics in a few, but first, let's get your thoughts. Kyle?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it was very transparent as to what the situation was. The Jones family has heard the rumors. They've heard the murmurs. They've heard the criticism from the Cowboys fans, and they weren't afraid to address it. And I thought the biggest quote of the day was Jerry saying it is a risk, but it's not a Hail Mary. At least that's the way he sees it. So I thought it was interesting. They outlined the process. They said how many coaches they talked to, even to the point of Pete Carroll, of course, a name that popped up late in the draft, late in the coach process. And he was instead of maybe a true candidate, he was somebody that Jerry talked to about Brian Schottenheimer. So an interesting tidbit along the way. The way that Brian started the press conference, I thought couldn't have been better, talking about the players and talking about relationships and talking about what he's done well throughout his time here in Dallas. A short 3 years, of course, 2 of those as offensive coordinator, 1 of those as an offensive analyst. And they've had some ups and they've had some downs. First 2 seasons he was here, they're 12-5. They've made it to the playoffs in a favorable manner, did not have success in the playoffs. And then this past year, of course, doing what they did. So in the grand scheme of it all, he still boiled it down to this is about the players. We're going to do this together. We're going to build this together. He even brought the fans in on that sentiment throughout as well. So that's where the emotion, I think, came from, is because he is a relationship guy. He builds through people around him. And that's one of the criticisms is, can he build a staff around him that will fight for him and that will have success? And I think we saw the plan to do that is in place today.
Yeah, I as I watched this press conference, I just thought about, I've been here now since Chan Gailey, so I've been through a lot of these press conferes with head coaches, and one thing I've learned,
6 or 7,
it's been a lot.
Yeah,
it's been a lot. One of the things I've learned is you don't win the press conference. The press conference isn't what really matters. Now, yeah. I do think Brian Schottenheimer represented himself very well today, represented his family very well today. I think he will be a good representative for the Cowboys organization as the head coach. But to me, the most important part of what he said the entire time was when he was asked about what you can expect from his offense particularly. And when he started getting into words like tempo, cut splits, Brian's been talking forever about why you got you guys so spread out. Why are we not compacting them a little bit more? Motion, running the ball. Those are the things those are the things, quite frankly, that got my attention because they're the things that we've been calling for the last 2 years, absent the second half of 2023. Because we were like, this offense is stagnant. This offense needs more motion. This offense needs more eye candy. This offense needs more creativity. And it sounded to me like that's the kind of things that he believes in as an offensive coordinator. Now, who knows if that's how it's going to end up when we get to game day? We'll see. But one thing I've also learned is you don't prejudge. You always give the ability and the time for someone to come in, to be able to implement what they do, and then see how they perform and then judge them on how they perform, not on someone's predetermined expectation of what they will be.
Yeah, for me, I have mixed feelings right now because it was a very emotional press conference, and you can't help but watch that and listen to him and all the comments that were made by Stephen and Jerry Jones and just feel the emotion. And everyone had a tear in their eyes sitting up there, and that, you feel for it. And it gets you rooting for the guy. He's a very likable person, and he mentioned it up there. One of his best abilities is to build those relationships, and you've seen that clearly. You saw the support of the players being present there, and one of the biggest mentions when talking about him was the relationship with Dak, and Dak giving his support to him. But the part where it kind of makes me feel a little uncomfortable with is knowing, well, okay, he was the offensive coordinator, and we know how the offense operated this year. Granted, Mike McCarthy was the one calling the shots and calling the plays, but still, you were on that side of the ball and on that side of the team. So it gives me a little pause, but I'm with you, Derek. I am a believer in giving people the chance and the opportunity. He seems to have everyone's support around him and all the offensive players too. You saw a lot of the offensive guys here in support for him. So that goes to show that maybe he had a different opinion than what Mike McCarthy had when they were working together. And only time will tell, but it's one of those things. And I don't want to bring an off-air conversation, but if I may, one of the comments you made, Derek, the other day, just talking about it in the hallway, you mentioned.
Let's be clear. What
Right.
No, I'm just playing. Go ahead.
It'll be fine. If not, fire me later. No, but one of the other things is, are you making Dak comfortable? That's a big question. Like, are you wanting to bring somebody in here that challenges Dak, or are you keeping somebody that makes the quarterback comfortable and maybe doesn't make him step out of his comfort zone? And one of the things that he mentioned was that conversation at a training camp when he threw an interception. And you like to hear those things. You like to hear somebody that, okay, it's not necessarily going to be someone that's going to, hey, let it easy on somebody. He said that he is willing to challenge Dak and willing to challenge whoever needs to be challenged. So, again, right now, I'm happy for the guy. I felt the emotions for him and with him, and I want to see what it is. But, of course, just like anybody else who's watching this and listening, I have the same question marks around it as well.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just to play off of her point there about the relationship with Dak, and I've said this on Talking Cowboys a couple times, is one of the key components to whoever your head coach is going to be. They have to have a relationship that will elevate Dak Prescott. That doesn't mean the best relationship in the building. And I kind of got that feel from when Schottenheimer was asked multiple questions about Dak. He didn't say, "Oh, we're best of buds. We went to a Duke basketball game together. We went to the Cowboys club and had some drinks together." He said, "No, we challenge each other and we know how to poke each other's buttons and push each other's buttons across the way." I think there's that level of competition. An elite competitor is what Schottenheimer called Dak. I like that about an offensive coordinator. I don't want somebody that's going to come in and be buddy-buddy with your $60 million quarterback. You need somebody that's going to challenge him to live up to the $60 million tag, and we'll see what ends up happening from that point forward. X's and O's are a concern, at least from my eyes. I love the culture hire. I love the overarching CEO element that Brian Schottenheimer can bring from a head coach. But during his time in Seattle, they weren't necessarily a ton of success in Seattle whenever it came to the X's and O's side of things. Here in Dallas, he did not call plays, and we talked to Stephen Jones after the fact. Stephen said he had opportunities elsewhere to call plays. If he wouldn't have been here, he would have called plays elsewhere. And if Mike McCarthy would have returned, he would have not called plays and wouldn't have been here. So it was one or the other. It was either Mike McCarthy or Brian Schottenheimer in terms of calling plays. And so he's betting on himself here. He's betting on himself that he can take the little things he learned from Pete Carroll and the success and failures of the past of being an offensive coordinator in this league for so long, and then try and build on what Mike McCarthy did well as a play caller and try and do away with some of the things that didn't go so well.
One other thing I'll mention, and when you talk about Dak and his relationship with Dak, there were two things he said that piqued my interest with regards to that. He talked about himself as being a relationship builder and as a good communicator. And one thing that I think is true of all leaders, all really good leaders, is they don't necessarily have to do it in the way that traditionally we've seen coaches. Dog cussing a guy, hollering and screaming at him. That's not the only way to do it. I think there are other ways, and I think you see some coaches that are successful at it. Dan Quinn's, I think, a master at it. Yeah. Of being able to build a kind of relationship with a player where there is a respect, And then sometimes words aren't even necessary. I mean, we've all had, I would assume, I hope we've all had that person in our life that just seeing a look of disappointment was enough for you to get it together and figure out what you needed to do to fix whatever situation you were in. And so I think that jumped out to me is if he has the ability to create, and that's what we've heard about him, and anybody that works around this building, that's one of the things that's really interesting for me for fans. Fans, I understand this is a brand new hire for you guys from the standpoint of you don't know Brian Schottenheimer other than what's been said about him in the media. Mm-hmm. You talk to football people, and by the way, there are instances of this out there. You can go look for him. You can look at people like Pete Carroll who've had things to say about him. I think Michael Lombardi last week had some really flattering things to say about him. There are people in football that talk about him and talk about him in a way to where he is very much an impressive person. But also the people who've been in the building, who've been around him, you can see those parts of his personality, his ability to connect with people. He's a people person. That matters. Now, is it going to matter on Sunday afternoon at 3:15 when you're playing whomever? I'm not sure. And that will be a matter of can he get that relationship and that ability to communicate to the point to where the players then have taken that and now they clearly understand their jobs and they can execute it at a high level because they're motivated to do so, right? And if he does that, then he's done his job and those things matter. If not, then he might be a really good relationship builder and a communicator that ultimately can't get the job done. But I think those are the things that make me say, okay, that's what he's going to be relying on. We've seen some shades of that. Now let's see how it translates with this football team.
Well, that's why I also believe it was important to hire somebody from within because you understand, it kind of goes back to what Jerry Jones had mentioned. I wrote it down. Why they didn't go after the Ben Johnsons and Kellen Moore officially. And he had said that, I have a coach that's very capable of uniquely and qualified to coach our team and coach Dak. So you have to have those certain qualities that only this building really understands. And it also goes back to what he had mentioned about the deference word. And for those who don't know, I put it on Google real quick so y'all can know. It means humble, submission, and respect. And that's something that he had to do a lot with Mike McCarthy here. Are y'all concerned at all about the deference that he'll have to have moving forward if there is deference that Brian Schottenheimer will have to have?
Deference for whom?
For Brian Schottenheimer. As far as...
Did you say Dak or did you say...
Brian Schottenheimer, as far as the deference that he'll have to have in terms of making those decisions and things like that, because that's something that he had to show under Mike McCarthy.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say he has a chance here that he's never had anywhere else. And he's talked about there were opportunities as a young offensive coordinator to step into a role, to step into a head coaching role. And I think part of the excitement from the front office in making this move is that he's going to cherish every opportunity that he gets. So there will be a different Brian Schottenheimer. There will be a different Schottenheimer than what you saw as an offensive coordinator because this is the first time he's really stepping into that overarching role. As a play caller, I think you're going to see a different Brian Schottenheimer as a play caller. If it works, though, you look like a genius, you win the games, and that's what Derek was talking to a moment ago of translating what you want to do from a person standpoint into how it affects you in between the white lines. If it doesn't work, that's an easy fix. You find an offensive coordinator that you trust, and you shift the play calling moving forward. It doesn't have to work out as the play caller immediately, though that's what their plan is. The reason you hire Brian Schottenheimer is because of his background, because of his experience, because of what he's done with this team. Agreed, kind of like what you were talking about in that quote there, but also because of who he's learned from. He's learned from some of the best names in the business. He's learned from Mike McCarthy within this building, and he's worked with some of the best quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, you name it, in the business as well. He's going to be different in this element, and that's where I think there's a little bit of a trust factor there of having that close proximity with him over the last 3 years.
I want to be clear on what I assumed, and you guys may have taken something differently. When Jerry talked about him having deference for Mike, what I assumed he was talking about was saying he didn't always agree with Mike.
Yes.
But as the head coach, he respected the authority that Mike had as the head coach. Now, that being said, some of the things that I've heard, and I would assume maybe some of you guys have heard some of the similar things around the building. A lot of what happened in the second half of the 2023 season was a result of his ability to bridge gaps. Mm-hmm. There was a bit of a chasm between the people that were making the decisions on the offense and some of the players and how it was all playing out. And his ability to help bridge that gap was a big reason why the second half of 23 looked very different than the first half of 23. That being said, that makes me feel really good about the abilities. And we start talking about deference. Yeah. That means that he was in a situation where he may not have agreed with the people who ultimately were in authority, but he knew how to say, okay, we're trying to get to this end goal. I've got these kind of two sides. How do I get everybody to want to push in that same direction? And somehow was a part of, maybe he wasn't the only person, but was a part of moving them in a direction where everybody felt good about it, and the results were the results. We saw a much better offense in the second half of the season than we saw in the first half. Yeah. So when you talk about deference, and especially in an organization like this where everything has to go through Jerry. Jerry is ultimately running, so he has to have deference for Jerry.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But also, how do you figure out how to make things work in that kind of environment? That says to me he knows how to play the game. Whatever that game is, he knows how to play that game. And I think that's something that's a real positive for him as a head coach here at the Dallas Cowboys. Mm-hmm.
Well, initially when Jerry made the comment of like, oh, he's seen him bite his tongue, initially inside me, I'm like, why are you biting? Like, speak up. Oops, sorry, I just spit everywhere. Literally.
Amber literally is like, speak up, say it. Say it.
Spit it out. Exactly, literally.
Welcome to the break.
Oh my God.
Yeah, open up your mouth, talk.
We don't do this on Talking Cowboys.
No.
All we've got is coffee in the morning.
No, but then you think about it and you're like, okay, you gotta understand that also when you're in those positions, you gotta know your place too. You gotta know when to bite your tongue and when to speak up. Mm-hmm. But it gives me, now that I think more about it and that I've processed it, I'm like, I'm glad he was at least biting his tongue. That means he has something to say, and now he's given the platform to do so. So it makes me feel somewhat excited to see what he can bring, in the sense that, okay, he saw potentially the things that were wrong, the things that he didn't agree with, the things that maybe us were seeing at the same time. He's having the same perspective as we were when we do these podcasts after a game and everything like that. So maybe that's something that it's motivating. But again, with the whole thing of initially when we were talking about looking at head coaches, I wanted someone with the experience. I wanted, because we're out of patience here. We're ready for something. And we know when you start something, there's growth that needs to happen. If you haven't done it before, there's time. There's a timetable there. Although there are scenarios where people have immediate success, but that's not normally. How do you say that?
It's not normally.
Yeah.
Well,
anomaly or whatever.
Anomaly.
Whatever.
Is the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, exactly.
But the thing about it is, if you look around the NFL right now, there's examples of all of it.
Yeah.
In multiple, like I look at Shanahan, I look at McVay, I look at Dan Campbell. Those are all guys at their first opportunity as head coaches and have done really, really positive things, right? I've also seen examples of experienced head coaches that you thought could just jump in there and make it work, and hasn't worked that way, right?
It's a funny game, isn't it?
Yeah, getting a head coach is. I was telling my wife this yesterday. I'm like, it's such a crapshoot, and to think that anybody is under the illusion that they've got the secret formula and should be, like, you're doing this wrong, or there is no formula to getting it right. There is a lot of, you have to just figure out who you think, based upon all the factors involved with your search, who you think best fits to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And that, just in its nature, is going to be flawed, because you don't know this person and how they're going to necessarily work once they get on the job. It's like any job hire. Like, hiring people is hard. It is extremely difficult. Yeah. And you feel blessed when you find one that actually fits and works, because if you've done it long enough, they're going to be people that you felt great about when they came in the door. And then a month in, you're like, oh my gosh, that was the worst decision I've ever made in my life. Trust me, I've been there. It happens.
With every Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, and I mean, even some of the experienced head coaches and guys that were former players, like a Dan Campbell, there's also guys that don't work out.
Yeah.
Remember Joey Gase? I mean, that whole experiment in New York, that didn't work out. He came from a great coaching tree. Young, hot offensive coordinator, got an opportunity, didn't work out. Same thing with, let's say, just from Dan Campbell's standpoint. You go and get a former player that you expect to change the culture. For every success that you have there, you also have a Jeff Saturday that didn't work out in Indianapolis. So it's a fickle game. It completely is. And it goes back to what the NFL is as a whole. The parity in the NFL is better now than it ever has been in the history of the sport. And because of that, it's not always a perfect science. It has to be perfect for what you do. And the Jones family believes that. And if we're talking about what Brian Schottenheimer can do to bite his tongue, I don't want him to bite his tongue. I want him to do exactly what Amber did, is spit it out.
Everywhere.
I want it
spit
to,
all over the table.
But in the situation
but it needs to be from a level of respect and trust across the board.
Right.
I don't think we always had that in Dallas, depending on whatever head coach it has been.
Right. Let's be clear about that. Like, everybody has to answer to somebody, right?
Yeah.
And so when he's looking at his head coach and he knows his head coach is vehemently maybe against the things that he thinks are the right things to do, then you have to be really thoughtful about how you handle that situation, right? Because at the end of the day, part of it is self-preservation. You want to keep your job.
And I can
but
already
at the same
hear-
time, you have to think about how do you best get this across to ultimately get to where you want to get. And people that are successful learn how to deal with people. That's why it's all about relationships. That's why when he says it is 90% or mostly about people, it is in every job. I don't care what the job is. The skill is a skill. If you can't deal with people, you will never be successful, whatever your job is.
Just talking out loud, not to stir up any drama.
Yeah.
Stir it up.
But if you're such a good people's person, and that's why the main description, wouldn't you imagine the relationship was there to speak up with, like, let's say, again, if I put myself in that scenario, I would probably do the same thing that he did. But I'm saying, like, if that's one of your qualities, wouldn't you imagine there would be a better open policy scenario where you feel free to say whatever?
In 2023, what we have is the results. The results said that there was a chasm.
Yeah.
The results were that ultimately they resolved it and they made the offense better, right? We saw the results. We don't know what happened behind the scenes. Whatever happened worked, right? And so that to me says that, again, that's why when he said it in the press conference, it made me perk up like, oh, okay, I like a person that problem solves. Like, whatever your job is, can you problem solve? Can you solve problems?
There are a lot
which
of
are
problems
people
here,
problems,
Derek.
right? A lot of
There's a lot of problems.
But a lot
here.
of problems
there's
are
a salary cap problem. There's a talent problem. There's a free agent problem.
There
there's a draft
are
problem.
at any given
there are a
moment,
lot of problems.
53 guys on your roster at the very least.
Yeah.
You're dealing with all 53 of those men.
Yeah.
How they're dealing with each other, and also whatever baggage they bring in from outside.
And your coaching staff.
Wife, girlfriend, kids, all those
Baby
things.
mama.
I know how that goes.
Whatever it is, you know.
I know how that
right?
goes.
You know, like honestly, and I'm being dead serious. Like when you and your wife had triplets, that became something that Nick and I have to think about.
Absolutely,
right? As leaders,
you guys have done a great job.
We have to think about that. So my point is like if he's got 53 of those guys, and as you said, his coaching staff, and he's having to manage all of that. Being a head coach is not just about X's and O's. X's and O's are only a part of it. And by the way, if there's drama going on in your locker room, there's no way they are executing the X's and O's as they should if they're not focused. So managing people and understanding people, that's a big part, a huge part of the job that I think gets lost a lot of times on people because they just see it and they say, well, it's got to be the person that knows the X's and O's.
Yeah, and it's got to be something you have to be ready for. I love how he was so open and honest with saying that, the past 2 decades I've been in coaching, I wasn't ready, but he feels like he's ready now. Do you guys believe, from what y'all heard today, that Brian is ready?
No, I don't. I don't believe he's ready because I think he's still got a long way to go.
Okay.
He's going to learn along the way. And that's not an indictment on Brian Schottenheimer. Let that be clear. But he has never been a head coach in the NFL. That starts today. That starts moving forward. He's going to build a staff. He's going to build a draft board. He's going to help build the future of this organization. He's going to learn along the way, and he might have success in year one, plain and simple, but he might not at the same time. He says he's ready for the opportunity. I believe in that. Is he ready to have success right now, which is what is expected out of Cowboys Nation? That's still yet to be seen, and that's built on the lessons he's going to learn from this point forward, through the draft, through this offseason, up until training camp. He's going to have to put together an entire training camp regimen for an entire 53-man roster, which is something he's never done before. He's got a lot of help to do so, and he's going to have an entire staff to help achieve that. But no, I don't think he's ready right now, but that doesn't mean he still can't have success because of the people that he's going to lean on around him to get it done.
I think he is. As far what is success, we will know. But as far as him ready for this opportunity, I think so. I mean, I love somebody that has self-awareness. The fact that he made that comment about years ago, he wasn't ready and admits that, but then feels now. And I'm just going based, again, my emotional side of things. When I hear the man with teary eyes say, I'm ready, and say, this is for his dad. I'm like, yes, let's do it. I'm in it. I'm emotionally invested now, and I want to see him succeed. But I think based on everything that I heard today, I feel that he's ready to put in the effort, or at least try to give all the effort that he can to make this happen. Yeah. Whether or not that's going to happen, that there are many, many variables that you don't know how well your players are going to play. You don't know about the injuries, what's going to happen there. You don't know how many people are you going to be able to get through free agency, the draft. So there's so many variables happening there. But as far as him being ready for the moment, I think he is, based on what I watched today.
The effort's going to be there, no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, he's gonna live and die. He said it today. He's like, it's going to kill me if I don't, or we're going to get a Super Bowl even if it kills me. Like the effort's going to be there.
Well, I'll tell you this. I don't know how anybody can know one way or the other, yes or no, that he's ready for this moment. Not even himself. What I can tell you is he's been training for this since the day he was born. And what I mean by that is, when you grow up in the house of an NFL coach, by the way, a successful NFL head coach, again, there are only 32 at any given time. There are only 32 of those in the world, right? And he grew up in the house with one, a successful one, again, at that. So when you say he's got to create a training camp regimen for the first time, maybe not. Maybe that's what he was doing at the age of 13.
He was right.
He was literally sitting in this room like, if I had a training camp.
Got my spiral notebook ready.
Right. What we know is that, like, that's you when you expose to something at an early age, when you're most creative, like kids are the most creative, right? When you're the most creative, you start thinking about things that you just don't think about as an adult. So who knows? He may be so overly prepared for this moment that it's just he'll be well beyond anybody else from the standpoint of preparation.
That's part of
Here's the issue.
Yeah.
The issue is, can he take all of those experiences and now know the exact moment when to apply them to the situation, because he sees it and says, oh, I recognize this is a situation I thought about when I was 15. Okay, let me do this to be able to fix this problem. Because again, that's all it is. It's going to be a set of problems that you're figuring out and that you're solving as you're trying to coach and get guys ready for playing football. So I don't know. The answer is I don't know. What I do know is he's been training for a very, 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 very long time. Now, can he actually make those experiences pay off?
I want to go back to what you had mentioned earlier about the different offense, the modernizing of the offense that he could do, possibly, that he actually mentioned about bringing some play action, tempo, shifts and motions. How much of that do you kind of mentioned that we don't know exactly if he's able to execute that, but do y'all have at least a little bit of confidence that he'll be able to do that and apply that for next year?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Do you think that there's a real possibility that he will be able to add those different things to the offense moving forward?
In 1 year?
In 1 year.
Some of them, yes. I think some of them are really just strategic things that if you train and you implement them into your offense, then they're going to be there.
Yeah.
I also will say, for a lot of those things I mentioned, that he mentioned, those were things that we're doing in the second half of 2023. So my suspicion is he's going to go back to that part of the year and he's going to be like, guys, remember what we were doing in the second half of 2023? That's going to be our starting point. Now, where I will ask him to, I don't know if be better is the right answer, but prepare his team for a better outcome is, once you got to the playoffs, that didn't seem to work.
Yeah.
It didn't work, like mightily. It didn't work.
Yeah.
So what's the next step in the evolution of that offense to get you ready for whatever's going to happen in the postseason? Can you get them back to a point where they're playing at the level that we saw them a year and a half ago, 2 years ago? And then at that point, can you get them beyond that so that once they get to the playoffs, they're ready to compete? I love the fact he wants to run the ball because I think that helps you compete in the playoffs. I don't think it's everything, though. I think there's a lot of other factors involved. A lot of that, too, also has to do with those players over there. Let's not say it's all on the coach. It depends on those players. But I think from the standpoint of things he wants to do, I think those are things you could implement tomorrow if you wanted to, because this team, we've seen them do it in recent history.
It goes back to the West Coast, right? He was never really on the West Coast whenever he was in Seattle. He was never really a West Coast scheme guy with the Seahawks. He did a lot of air Coryell, air raid, spread it out, that kind of thing. They ran the ball okay, but it was really because they had the people in place, not necessarily more so scheme. Mike McCarthy always talked about it. The West Coast offense is predicated on that inside zone, that run game, and then working off of the deep play action shot. You're going to see a mixture of that. So kind of like what Derek said, we don't really know what the extent of what he will take from Mike McCarthy. He's not going to carbon copy the playbook and set it down and say, here we go, guys, let's get after it. There will be tweaks and changes and things that he liked and things that he didn't like. And that's part of why I'm excited about it, because I didn't hate what Mike McCarthy did from an offensive standpoint. I don't think that was ever really the true problem. There were some game situation moments and there was some play calling in the moment that was a problem.
Right. Not the actual playbook.
Not the actual playbook, which is completely different. Now it's whether or not Brian's able to change it. I called him Brian. Coach Schottenheimer. Whenever,
but isn't that how he comes up?
It's
though?
totally what
like
it
when
is.
we see him around the office, he seems like
he's a
one
super.
of the guys.
I saw it before the press conference. Congrats. He stopped down. He asked me how the kids were, and we were good. Like he's just that kind of guy. Builds relationships. But in terms of the X's and O's, he's got to know in those moments, in that experience, when and where to go in certain direction. I don't know if we're going to see that until the middle of the year or truly toward the end of the year, just how much he took from McCarthy's scheme and how much he's taken from his time in New York and Seattle and previously along the way.
I don't know how to answer your question because I don't really know quite how I currently feel about this. Because again, yes, I want to think of that. I want to think that he, during his time here, was able to identify the good and the bad and be able to separate the two and want to improve on the good. We've seen the offense when they can be very successful and put up numbers and statistics and things like that. But at the same time, he was the offensive coordinator last year. So again, there's that division that we don't know to what extent, how much of a voice he actually had in those rooms. We don't know. We were in there. But he was the offensive coordinator again. So again, it is right now it's hard for me to formulate a positive thought in that regard. But as a head coach, I think he's the right person. I love everything I heard. As a play caller, I don't know just yet. I got to wait and see.
Well, it starts with surrounding Dak Prescott with the pieces necessary, and that's something that Jerry Jones was very adamant about in the press conference, that they are looking forward to surrounding Dak and giving Brian Schottenheimer the pieces that he needs. But we've got to go. We got another half hour of Podcast Nation here.
They're not going to be better than us. You might as well keep us in here.
Oh, I mean, y'all can stay if y'all want to. Right.
We got enough. You add an extra mic over there.
Right? Just go ahead and bring on everybody.
We'll have 8 in here.
8 people in here. All right.
Chris is like... I was going to say what he's going to say, but we'll keep that.
Don't say it on air.
You literally kill us. All right, for Ambar Garcia, Kyle Yeomans, Derek Ewelton, Nicole Hutchison, we'll be right back with more.
Here we go. Tyler from Dude Perfect here. Big news. We just dropped our very own Dude Perfect smoothie with Smoothie King.
We is strong. It's my recipe.
Technically, we all came up with it, Kobe.
I mean, you put a potato in yours.
I was experimenting.
Yeah, we picked up on that. Guys, this is fruit smoothie perfection. I even heard it recently quoted that it was food perfect.
Yeah, I was the one that said that.
Oh, that was funny. It's punny.
Thank you. Anyways, get the Dude Perfect smoothie only at Smoothie King.
My smoothie.
Hi, Drew Pearson, former Dallas Cowboy and now Pro Football Hall of Famer here. If you're struggling with your vision and tired of those contacts and glasses, don't throw a Hail Mary. Go where I went. Laser Care Eye Center, the official LASIK partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Drew, thank you so much for trusting us with your vision correction procedure. At Laser Care Eye Center, we offer 6 different vision correction procedures to help patients see.
Check them out at dfweyes.com. Tell them Drew sent you. Hood hood.
I'm Dak Prescott, quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys.
And they snap it to Prescott, who looks right. It's not there. He escapes left. He'll run for a first down.
Just like football, when it comes to crypto, it's important to have a team you can trust. With blockchain.com, I know I'm in good hands. Since 2011, they've been trusted by millions around the world to buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrency.
Prescott's going to run this himself. Run it up the middle, and he scores.
Whether you're new to crypto or an active trader, they've got you covered. What are you waiting for? Get started at blockchain.com.
Cowboys fans, when it comes to navigating the ever-changing world of tax, your business needs a partner it can trust to tackle even your biggest tax challenges. Ryan is the largest firm in the world dedicated exclusively to business taxes. Our team of tax professionals has local expertise in all areas of tax and can help you uncover savings opportunities you didn't know you had. Learn more about how Ryan can improve your overall corporate tax performance by visiting Ryan.com. Ryan, the official tax partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Back to the Cowboys Nation podcast.
All right, welcome back into Podcast Nation. We're switching up a little bit with a new crew. We've got Tommy Yarsh, Nick Eatman, Patrick Nosey Walker, myself, your host, Nicole Hutchison, to break down the new hire of and welcoming of new head coach Brian Schottenheimer here for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, real fast, we got a chance to hear from Derek Eagleton and Kyle Yeomans, Ambar Garcia about their thoughts on the new hire. I do want to get y'all's opinions because we just heard about an hour and 12 minutes welcoming in Brian. So I'll go with you, Nick Eatman.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I like what he said. You don't win or lose a press conference, but why is it wet right here?
Yeah, they sprayed some Lysol.
It's a good. It's a good thing. Okay, good. You never know. No, but I like what he said. But the thing about it is we'll know in time. I mean, this was a surprise move. I'm not going to sit here and say like, yeah, I like this move all the way. I didn't know about it when I saw your list of 20 candidates when we first started. I would have thought he was in the late teens as a chance to get this job. I was just surprised. So I think we all are. I'll just say I think he's here because of things we can't see. And that only time is going to tell with that.
Yeah, for me, I agree. It's definitely a surprise pick. And I'll be honest. I mean, no sense in pretending. He was not my pick. I sat right here and I said who my pick was, like a lead horse, like a Ben Johnson or a Pete Carroll, if you want to experience. Funny how the Pete Carroll tree kind of ties right into who they ended up getting with Brian Schottenheimer. But as a leader of men, that was a concern I would have had with Kellen Moore. I don't have that concern with Brian Schottenheimer. He can get buy-in. He has players who are already bought in. Talk about Dak, Overshown, and those guys who were present at the press conference. That speaks volumes. Yep. So there are positives there. Concerns for me, they're obviously there. First-time NFL head coach. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I don't know what his input was as far as weekly game plans under Mike McCarthy. How much influence did he have? Which means I don't know what his game plan will look like. But he said the right things, like Nick said, particularly to my question about what the modernization of this offense would look like. He went into some detail there. I liked what was said. Let's see how he can put that into action, though.
Yeah, it's all about prove it, right? I mean, this is a huge proving ground for Brian Schottenheimer. And, we talk about winning and losing press conferences. This is a guy who's never going to lose a press conference. I mean, even his time as an offensive coordinator, he was fantastic with us. He says all the right things, and, he does all the right things when we're around. And now, of course, when you're a head coach or any kind of coach, you got to win. And he understands that. I think Jerry Jones understands that. And Jerry Jones knows that this is a big risk for him. He understands that. And he made it very clear to us over an hour that he knows this is a risk. But he thinks that Brian Schottenheimer gives this team the best chance to win in the playoffs. Patrick's absolutely right. As a leader of men, I don't question that at all. This guy is going to get his players bought in, and you saw that with the guys who were already there. He's got a good relationship with Dak Prescott. I think that's the most important part of all this in the entire coaching search was, what can we do to maximize Dak Prescott? Because he's got 4 years, CeeDee Lamb's got 4 years, and they're more than likely about to re-sign Michael Parsons. Yep. So there's that window. Brian Schottenheimer here for 4 years. There's that window, and he's going to try to maximize Dak Prescott. You guys are right. This is not the name that we were expecting. I don't think it's the name that the fan base was expecting, clearly, just scrolling through social media the last couple of days. But you can't you can't judge anything until we see what he is, because we don't know what Brian Schottenheimer is yet. He's got to prove it to everybody.
Well, and the guys that they wanted or the fans wanted have to prove it as well. We don't know that. We don't know if
Ben Johnson's going to be a good hire, or if Aaron Glenn.
Right. You don't know that. It comes down to players. You got to have the players, and that's the big thing. Is this roster going to be good enough?
That's the part.
And that's the part. And look at the yesterday's games, the NFC Championship games. I don't think the Cowboys were on the same level as the Eagles. We saw that in 2 games. I've said it a bunch of times. I think they're just as good, if not better, than Washington. We've seen that. So Washington's roster, a lot of them were from here. So I mean, I think that you're not that far away roster wise, but you got to be able to keep it going, and you're going to lose a lot of free agents. You got to make sure and keep some of them.
And that's what's going to be challenging for them. And I spoke to Stephen Jones after the press conference about that particular thing, where it's like, okay, obviously the goal every year going into free agency is you build and improve the roster. But you're in a fairly unique situation in that you have 22 looming free agents inside the building. So how do you balance that challenge of trying to figure out who you're bringing in from the outside versus who you're trying to retain from the inside, the Jordan Lewises and the Osa Odighizuwas and those guys like that. So you're working through all of that while you're trying to figure out what Brian Schottenheimer's offensive scheme is going to look like, what he needs on that side of the ball. And hey, by the way, who is definitively going to be your defensive coordinator? Sounds like Matt Eberflus is expected to rejoin the Cowboys, but you have to also get with him and say, okay, well, here are the pieces that we have. Here's who we might lose. Of that batch, who would you like to retain? And then look at free agency outside the building and say, who do you want? And then comes the salary cap conversation.
Yeah, it's a tough task for Brian, obviously having to bring in his staff and figure out which players. You have a lot of free agents as well, 26 of them who hit the market, so you got to figure out how they fit all in your system and move from there. But I do want to ask, where should Brian Schottenheimer start as far as the staff-wise? Because we don't know who his DC is. We don't know who the offensive coordinator is, and he's going to be calling the plays. So who do you feel fits best in those 2 positions? Patrick?
Difference.
Well, I don't know if it's coordinator or not, but better fix this offensive line. And so if that is the coordinator comes in and he's got offensive line ties, even better. But all the positions matter. We get that. But your offensive line, if your offensive line is cooking, your quarterback just magically gets better. Your running game gets better, and everything to follow. So I think the offensive line and figuring out what happens there, who your O-line coach is, and your scheme and all that kind of stuff, I think is big.
Yeah, and when you talk about the names that have been lost here recently, Bones Faso, you lose him to Tennessee along with Rainer Stewart, his assistant. You lose wide receivers coach Robert Prince to Miami, and one of the biggest losses is Al Harris going to the Chicago Bears. First of all, you have to stop the bleeding, and I think stopping that bleeding starts with Alunda Wells. You have to figure out a way to keep Alunda Wells in this building, and then as far as adding pieces around Alunda Wells on the offensive side of the ball, again, offensive line coach, what does that look like? That's going to be critical for your success, especially as Schottenheimer is talking about, establishing the run as a means of setting up the play action, and we know that Dak Prescott excels at play action. So the only way you do that is if you have a threat of the run, but that means your dogs up front have to absolutely maul on a snap-to-snap basis. From a defensive side of the ball, again, until we know definitively who the DC is going to be, it's really difficult to know what those position coaches look like, right? But to remind everyone, Mike McCarthy was not the only contract that expired January 14th. So all the position coaches are in free agency as well. And they have to, and we've said this on Talking Cowboys, the position coaches, if it's a situation where the Cowboys want them to remain, they have to want to remain with the Cowboys in this incoming regime. So.
Well, when it comes to the most important thing on the docket for Brian Schottenheimer here, it's finishing the alignment that is necessary to win. I know, right? I have to bring it up every time. But it's finishing the alignment that has to happen if you want to win games. I think that the ownership and the front office and Brian Schottenheimer are aligned. Now you've got to align your roster. This has got to look like a Brian Schottenheimer roster and a Brian Schottenheimer football team. So you mentioned some of the things that he's going to want to do as the offensive play caller, which Jerry Jones confirmed he would be doing. Tempo, shifts, motion, play action. What does that mean? What does that mean they're going to look for? This team historically has built a lot through the draft. So this is where Brian Schottenheimer and Will McClay have got to get on the same page of, hey, what are we targeting in the draft when they go to the Senior Bowl? When they go to the Senior Bowl today or tomorrow, whenever they leave and head over there, what are we looking for, and why do we need to look for this position? So that's got to be the first order of business, because then you can round out your coaching staff to mirror that. If offensive line, say, is what they want to look for, then you go find an offensive coordinator that's got a history with the offensive line. If you want a talented running back to come in and try to change your running game, then you go maybe look at for a running backs coach with a lot of experience, or someone with a mixture of both. And then defensive coordinator. If it is Matt Eberflus, I think you look at that and you're going to get a guy who stops the run and is good at stopping the run. Matt Eberflus teams have done a good job of that, and they turn the ball over. They get interceptions in the back half of the defense. So there would be some continuity there, I think, with the Cowboys defense, and that's a familiar face. But for me, the most important thing on the docket for Brian Schottenheimer from day one is getting your personnel in order and having a plan for how you want to go forward in free agency too. And Stephen Jones kind of hinted at that maybe they'd be a little bit more, I don't know if I want to say aggressive.
They're going to be. I don't mean they're going to be.
They have to be.
They have to be. They're going to sign more players in free agency this year than they have in the last 5 years.
I think so.
Yes, and it's going to look different because you've got 25 free agents.
Yeah.
You're not going to sign if they signed all of their own guys,
and they won't.
They won't. But let's say they did, no one would look at that and go, "Oh, look at them being in free agency." You have to fill these spots, and they're going to fill it more on the outside than on the inside, which is what a 7-10 team should do.
Right.
So I don't think that they're going out and going to be a lot more aggressive with these great, day one signings, but they're going to have 6 or 7 guys, maybe 10 from the outside that I think is going to look like they're a little bit more aggressive, but you got to fill these spots.
Yeah, and I think it leads, for me, a guy like Eric Kendricks, for example. I was able to speak with Kendricks shortly after the Commanders game, and after we talked about what happened on the field, I asked him about his future and everything, and he said he would love to return to the Cowboys. And that was, Zimmer's looming decision notwithstanding, he would love to remain because he loves what happened in the locker room. He saw what Eric Kendricks and some of these free agents like him who brought in on one-year deals, they saw a team go through a 5-game losing streak and never break and never turn on each other. So you need a leader like Eric Kendricks. So when you're talking about in-house free agents, that's a name that pops up at the top of my list. But then when it comes to outside free agents, I agree, they're going to be more active. I would not confuse that with being all in.
Yeah, right.
Right? So don't go take that and run in that direction. But they have no choice, which is what Eben's saying. They have no choice. They're going to hemorrhage in-house free agents. You just have to hope that they're able to figure out a way to keep like a Jordan Lewis, an Oso Digizua, and Eric Kendricks, and then some of those on the bottom half of that 22, 26 looming free agent list. You just got to know they're going to go elsewhere, and then you got to fill those spots.
Watch for special teams too. Fossil's now in Tennessee. The good thing about them they got the number 1 pick in the draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means they have the number 1 pick in the second round.
Correct.
So put a second-round tender on Kevontae Turpin and see what happens there. If Tennessee decides to sign him, they're going to drop the first overall pick in the second round. I mean, I don't think for a 29-year-old return specialist who's dynamic, there's no doubt about it. But I think most people would take the top pick in the second round.
That is a conversation, my friend.
I mean, but I think Sieg is a free agent, right? Yeah. Or in Anger,
he is. Yeah, every special.
But they have a punter that's really good over there in Tennessee, I believe. But still, watch for that kind of stuff. The Goodwins of the world, the special teams guys. Yeah,
all the more reason to make sure that you lock up Brandon Aubrey, because if you allow Brandon Aubrey to approach free agency, Bones Fossil has his ear, because the reason that Brandon Aubrey is in this league right now and successful is because of Bones.
You ever been to Tennessee in the winter? Seriously, have you ever been to their stadium's right over the water?
Nissan.
Yeah, it's pretty dang cold over there, and it's kind of swirly. And if you look at, he's been great most of the time. Right. His misses are outdoors, Washington, Philly, those kind of things. Yeah. I mean, when he's 70-yarder against Carolina, I can't believe he didn't make that. I'm just saying, he needs to also know that. I mean, if I get half my games here indoors, that's not bad.
It's a good
point. It's good. So I don't think he would just jump to any of those players. Well, like you say, he's free agent, and you'll probably franchise him next year.
Yeah.
That's an easy franchise.
Point being is that Fossil is going to be in his ear.
Yeah.
It's going to, just like he'll be in Kevontae's ear.
Poaching.
He Poach.
That's something that actually I was
Poach
scrolling
is
through
on.
Twitter, and Brandon Aubrey had said this on a podcast. Don't remember the exact
saw
one,
that.
but he had said that, I'm just hoping that Fossil doesn't go after my guys
See what I mean?
and Brian Anger and Trent C, because that would be really hard for him.
Well, he also said I was going to try to trade. He goes, he'll probably try to trade for me. Tampering.
Goodness.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's fine.
Careful
Call
there.
for something.
Well, I mean,
One way or another, Eatman wants to cost the Titans a draft.
I'm just saying.
Either he wants it to
I mean, why
come
not?
here or just delete it from there.
Yeah. How like was it 10 years ago maybe how we didn't get in trouble for tampering for Earl Thomas, I'll never know, because we tried. Like
Shenanigans.
we talked about Earl Thomas over and over and over. We played a game in Seattle week 3, and we thought he was just going to come back on the charter with it.
Yeah.
Like they're going to make the trade, he's going to come back. And
Locker room. And
yeah.
That was a mess.
I'm crying. All right, Brian Schottenheimer, obviously, we don't know his exact system. We don't know the personnel that he wants to keep. But if you guys are Brian, what free agent would you start with keeping? Aside from Brandon Aubrey.
Oh, keep
Here, yes.
Right here?
Yes.
Ooh,
here in Dallas.
right now it's a dead heat between Osa and Jordan for me, and I could make the case for both that they're both 1As for me, not even a 1A, 1B. When you talk about Jordan Lewis, you're talking about a guy who is coming off of arguably an All-Pro season, most certainly a Pro Bowl snub season, and he was one of the most vocal leaders on either side of the ball in the locker room, and he was not afraid to step in front of everyone and say, hey, details, this is where we're messing up, practices aren't good enough. That's a leader. Osa is the same way, a little bit more reserved, but nonetheless, we know behind the scenes he's much the same way. As far as impact on the field, that defensive line, as Mozzie Smith tries to continue to improve in year 3, you don't know what you got in Justin Rogers. You waived him, but you brought him back. Things didn't work out with Linval Joseph, Jordan Phillips. We know how that failed. Osa was the definitive guy, right? So you need that. Secondary-wise, you lose Trayvon Diggs. You're not going to have him back for training camp or the beginning of the season. You lost Deron Bland for half of the season. Kalen Carson, you ended up losing him, so forth and so on. Josh Butler, he played and broke out and then tore his ACL. Who was the stabilizing force that entire time? It was Jordan Lewis. So for me, that it's 1A and 1B. I mean, 1A and 1A, I say you got to figure out a way to keep both of them.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that both of those guys are. In terms of finding that alignment on this roster, that's 1A and 1A.
Yeah.
I mean, no, when you look at that Jordan Lewis and how he was able to play in the nickel, I think that with so many defenses kind of shifting closer and closer to running more and more nickel, depends on who the Cowboys bring in as defensive coordinator. But regardless of where you line him up on the field, he's got the versatility to do a lot for you on the back half. And then I've said since I was hired here 4 months ago that football is a line of scrimmage game, and you win championships at the line of scrimmage. If you want to win championships, you keep your good players on the line of scrimmage, and Osa Odighizu is just that.
I mean,
Jordan Lewis has proven
as being one of the old guy here. I'll talk about the old guy. I'm gonna call Zach Martin. I'm gonna be like, what are we doing here? Okay. What are we doing? Yeah. Is there football left in Zach Martin? And if he says yes and wants to do that, then I got to look there also, because I'm not a believer that he's just forgotten how to play football at a high level. I just don't think you go from all pro to nothing. If he wants to. Same with Tank. DeMarcus Lawrence as well. I want to see that, because from a leadership standpoint, I think you've got something there from a run stopper. But Kendricks is another guy. All what you said is great too. I mean, all of those guys, and you're not going to get all of them because the market's gonna. We saw it with Dorrance Armstrong. I mean, you're just not going to be able to sign a lot of those guys.
Tank is a great answer, because they were bleeding defensive ends from injury. You lost Sam Williams in training camp. You lost Micah to the high ankle sprain for several games, much longer than he thought he'd be off the field. You lost Marshawn kneeling with that overlap with Micah Parsons. And you lost Tank early, and you lost him for the remainder of the season. So if you can get Tank back, because, once Sam Williams is back on the field, he needs grace. He's not just going to hit the ground running. Marshawn kneeling, I expect him to take another step. You would hope they look to bring back a guy like Carl Lawson, who was really strong for you on the back half of last season. But when you talk about locker room leadership, you talk about still able to play at a high level, DeMarcus Lawrence is not far removed from his most recent Pro Bowl, so he can still get some things done. So that's a great answer.
I like all those answers, because as your first year as a head coach, you also need that extension of you, veteran guys who know how to explain your system and things like that. So I think that I like those answers.
Let me throw in one more thing too about the coaches, the linebacker coach, your defensive end coach. secondary coach. You need coaches on the field too. So, if you say your linebackers coach is not, is like a first-year coach or a second year, whatever, I'd like to have Eric Kendricks, there on the squad. Same with defensive line, and, Jordan Lewis at corner. So the veteran guys there that can kind of help coach, because the coaches can only do so much, and so I like having, I don't have enough money for all these guys we just mentioned.
But then to Kendricks, to the point of Kendricks, you also look at, we talked about how Overshown was present in the press conference this morning. I said Trevon Diggs is not going to be ready. Yeah, with crutches. I said how Trevon Diggs is not going to be ready for training camp beginning of the season. Same applies for DeMario and Overshown. So from a linebacker standpoint, this is yet another season where the Cowboys are, I don't want to say dire straits, but they're right there when it comes to the linebacker depth, especially if you lose Eric Kendricks.
Sorry, I want to throw one more point about those two you just mentioned, Diggs and Overshown. The Cowboys have had history with the injuries to both of those players. Both of those injuries they had with Diggs, it was Noah Brown, and then also with Overshown, it was Connor Williams. Both of those guys were able to come back in training camp the next year and contribute and play. It's not always likely. Pup would make sense, but this training staff is not ruling out anybody. And if we don't know anything about Overshown for sure,
absolutely.
I'd
bet on him.
Yeah, he's been open about. He's like, I'm not going to be back in December. I'm going to be back before that.
Before then,
hey,
I believe it.
Yeah,
I believe it too.
Got to be smart with it, but
that's called Texas Fight.
Oh, here we go.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah. I knew it. I tried to. That's why I look back at you.
Connor Williams.
To ignore that.
Yeah,
came back.
Yeah,
Texas
Fight.
Yeah. And they let him go.
I'd do it just to make him mad. That's all.
Texas can't fight except for twice during the season.
Did seeing a lot of the guys from both sides of the ball in that press conference give you guys at least a little comfort in Brian Schottenheimer and what he can do for this team?
Well, I think it gives you – I was always comfortable in Schottenheimer as the culture guy. If you're looking for culture – Brian Schottenheimer is your guy, and he could be the guy anywhere. And so I think the players showing up is reflective of that. But what really caught my eye in terms of what he said in terms of his players is, if you're not playing to your players' strengths, whether it be schematically or whatever else it may be, if you're not playing to your players' strengths, and you don't have any business being in this business. And so I think that that's something that every player loves to hear because, hey, that's telling them, look, you're good. We know what you're good at. We're going to make sure that we utilize you the right way so that we can win games.
That reminds me of another free agent then that maybe you should consider.
Who's that?
Brandon Cooks. Because I'm sorry, they did not utilize him to his strength. He's not a guy that goes 7 yards, turn around, catch the ball, and fight with defenders. He's not. He weighs 165 pounds. He needs to be running down the field or across the field, stretching. And they haven't done that as much as they should. So if I'm Brandon Cooks, I'm like, let's see, I got 1,000 yards in 4 other quarterbacks, and I come to Dallas, and he's not the number one receiver anymore, but they didn't utilize him the right way. So maybe that would be one too you could consider. That
he wasn't always the number one receiver in those 1,000 seasons. Sometimes he played second fiddle and still was able to your point. When Shotty said that as an answer to my question about modernization of this scheme, the clouds parted and the gospel was sang in my ears because as a football guy, that's what you want to hear, right? So again, he won the press conference because he's saying the right things. Let's see it be put into execution and action. But for me, it's always players greater than signed scheme. Right, you get the players, and then you build around the players as to what works and put them in positions to win. I think from a defensive standpoint, that's where Mike Zimmer struggled over the first half of the season. Obviously, injuries, we get it, we know. But if you wonder why the Cowboys were struggling to rush the passer, why they were struggling to take the ball away, if you go back and look at the film, and we broke it down on every one of our podcasts, it was because guys like, for example, Donovan Wilson, he's not a cover guy, but he was being asked to cover more than he was being asked to play downhill and run support and play wire to wire. So that's a perfect example of what I mean, where if you really want to be successful, what Schottenheimer said as far as players is greater than scheme, that is the perfect thing to say. Now show me. Yeah. Show me that you mean that. And that's where I'm at with it.
Show me that you mean that and show me, sorry to cut you off.
You're good.
Show me that you mean that and show me that you can win. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all that matters with this, right?
Right.
Is he's got to win.
Everybody that has been negative on Twitter, and there's been a couple,
A couple?
Million. And
100,000.
And I get it. I mean, I totally understand. But you know what most of them say? I hope I'm wrong. I mean, they say it all the time. I hope I'm wrong. And when they are, or if they are, they won't. You won't see those tweets again and the receipts and all that stuff. That no one's going to say all of that. And so it won't matter, you know, if they start out 5-0, 5-1, whatever. He's going to have to win in the playoffs. We know that. But I mean, my point is that you're right. It's only about winning at this point. You can't do anything else. You don't have to like this move. You're not supposed to like this move. You're really not. You're not supposed to look at his – because you're like, what has he done? Nothing that you would say, oh, that's why he's the coach. The reason he's a coach is because of relationships, the things, the way he's handled himself off the field, the stuff you just can't see.
Right.
So that's what's going to come up.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, and this is from Patrick, who wrote a great article about the press conferences. I think that you're welcome.
Go check it out.
When have you read it? You just posted it and you came here.
I read it when I came down here when I said we were getting ready.
Oh, okay.
Come on, don't try to throw me under the
No,
bus.
I'm just saying that you're a fast reader. That's why you graduated UT in 2 years.
Welcome. So what I was saying is, and I lost my train of thought. No, I'm just kidding.
Great article by Patrick.
It was a great article by Patrick, and I think, you know, when it comes to the experience and, oh, this guy's never been a head coach, and that's all well and true, and we don't know what this is going to be. We never will be. I think that for him to say, you know, look, back in the past when he was with the Jets as the offensive coordinator and he had head coaching job offers on the table from other NFL franchise, to say, you know what, I don't know if I'm ready for this right now. I don't know if this is my time. And to step back and have the maturity to step back, because that's, one, a big pay raise. It's two, you know, a big spotlight for you. And, you know, it's something that will catapult your career, and it's something that you'll always have next to your name. To say, you know what, I still need some more time. I'm not ready right now. And now to come out and say, you know, I'm ready. I'm ready. And he credited Pete Carroll a ton for what he learned from him and Mike McCarthy. I mean, you think about the guys that he's learned from. I mean, Pete Carroll, Mike McCarthy, his father, Marty Schottenheimer, who's the only head coach in NFL history to have more than 200 wins and not be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, you're coming from a pretty good tree there. And Jerry Jones said it, the apple doesn't fall from the tree. Again, all of this is going to have to be proven on the field. He's got to win games. But you can't question that this guy knows what he's talking about in football.
And when it comes to the fans, I'll say this, and this is me speaking to the fans directly. If you're one of the fans who are taking the wait-and-see approach before you buy in, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you because, as stated at the top of this episode, I have the pros for him. Culture guy, he can get guys to buy in, and he's saying all the right things. As far as schematics, said the right things, but I don't know yet. I don't know what he looks like as a head coach. So I'm waiting and I'm seeing, and then we'll go from there. For those fans, I'm right there with you. For the ones that say are secretly or maybe not so secretly hoping that he fails so that you can be proven right and get those tweets off, that's disgusting behavior because at the end of the day, who are you actually a fan of? Like, which team are you actually a fan of? So I say that to say I am right here on the line for Brian Schottenheimer. I see some pros, but I have some very real concerns. Time is going to tell me which way I should go there. But I am actively rooting for him to succeed because I want this organizational drought to end. What did I say to Schottenheimer when he was walking past upstairs? I said, hey, Schotty, number 6, I'm serious. I want him to finally be the guy to do it. Don't root against him, but if you want to take the wait-and-see approach, I get it. I'm right there with you.
I think that it's important to understand that it takes time in order to get back to that top of where the Cowboys have been. But I did love how he had mentioned, the things that he learned from Pete Carroll and how he challenged him offensively and learning the new schemes, and that the schemes that the Cowboys have had so many issues with the past couple of years. So it's a lot of uncertainty, but a lot of things to look forward to in this new era with Brian.
I am being extremely objective. You talk about UT. Remember, Schottenheimer's resume includes a stint at Georgia, and that was not a fun season. So, objectively speaking, again, I see the pros. I see the pros. I see the concerns.
You're trying to help the situation or make it worse?
No, I'm just letting everyone know that because there will be some that'll hop on YouTube and Twitter. Oh, well, no, see, he's selling. I'm not selling you a damn thing. I'm telling you the pros, the positives I see in this young man because he's only 50. Right? I see in this young man and my very real concerns that only time will tell if they're well-founded or if they can go by the wayside.
Yeah. And I said that to someone on Twitter, listen, I'm not a DJ. I'm not going to spin anything. Okay.
Hey,
I'm not trying to. I'm just saying if I had anything else cool to say, I might, but I can't. I can't go there. other than Switch.
House party.
And you know.
House party.
No.
What is house party?
Don't bump the table.
Sorry.
Oh.
I'm gonna let you just go.
You don't know?
Don't
My
bump.
bad.
Just don't.
I
Just
feel like
know
I
that
shouldn't have said
All
that.
right.
Don't bump the table.
Dragon breath. I think my point is I'm not trying to spin it. He's saying the same thing. There's nothing to. I mean, this
is what it is.
Time will tell on this situation. One thing I do like that they said though at the end was this seems to be a combination of continuity, carryover, and newness as well. Yeah. So it's not completely new because this has been a good football team. There hasn't been a great football team.
Yeah.
But this has been a good football team. They're trying to figure out how to be great, and maybe Schottenheimer can get them there.
Yeah, only time will tell. Jerry said he likes his fundamentals, he likes his style, he likes the lineage. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what Brian Schottenheimer brings to the Dallas Cowboys. But that'll do it for our podcast nation. For Tommy Yarish, Nick Eatman, Patrick Nosey Walker, and the rest of our DallasCowboys.com crew.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys? Yeah!